Mercedes have revealed the new colours of the W15, and it seems like this is definitely the most beautiful car we're going to be watching on the grid. However, beauty and performance are two different things. But unlike what we saw in the past 2 years, it seems like the Brackley-based squad are determined to return to their winning ways, despite scoring only one win in the past 2 seasons. The new philosophy and design strikes a lot of similarities to Red Bull, so the question that all the fans have right now is, did Mercedes copy the most successful car on the grid from last year? And if so, could this result in some positive results for the Brackley-based squad? It's obvious that the sidepod design of the W15 is very similar to what we saw on the RB19, and although many find this fact shocking, it's actually quite expected. Mercedes said that they will implement more traditional philosophy to their car headed into the 2024 season. Yes, they didn't practically say they'll copy Red Bull, but after trying out some polar extremes in the past 2 years and being nowhere near the highest place on the podium, Mercedes have decided to follow the path that McLaren and Aston Martin set in 2022 and 2023. Start a development direction similar to the one of Red Bull and implement the design in their own way. This seems to be the most practical solution for all of Mercedes' issues. And when talking about this matter, James Allison was open about the expectations from the W15, adding, "We've also worked hard to create a less draggy car and to add performance in the corners. There's also been some housekeeping on areas which we had room for improvement, including the DRS effect and pit stop performance. We were always very good at delivering a pit stop in a repeatable time, which is the key thing for a pit stop. The repeatable time that we could do our pit stops in was still 3 to 4 tenths slower than the best teams though, so hopefully we will have moved in the right direction there." As Allison said, there are many areas in which Mercedes needs to improve, but obviously the most important one is the performance of the car. What they can use as a huge inspiration is the fact that Red Bull seems to have copied something that Mercedes and McLaren implemented on their cars, and that is the bulbous cover of the engine. The fact that this was seen on the RB20 shows that Red Bull and Mercedes will have more or less the same looking cars on the grid. But is this actually bad news for either one? It does make sense for Mercedes to copy Red Bull, because first of all, it's not a literal copy-paste of their car, it's just borrowing the idea of the design and implementing it in their own way. This is what the other teams tried to do when Mercedes was leading the way ahead from 2014 to 2020, with the only difference now being that the budget cap now allowing the big teams to spend however much money they want in order to put the car in the best position they can. After all, the technical regulations do not allow the teams to invent that much, and if you have leaders like Red Bull paving the way for the rest of the grid, it would be silly not to try and implement their philosophy on your car, but with your own iterations. This is what McLaren did in the middle of the 2023 season and emerged as the most consistent challenger of Red Bull, and this is what Aston Martin did at the beginning of the season, with a huge help of the poached technical director Dan Fallows, who transferred a lot of knowledge from the RB18. Now, Newey has also stressed out the fact that a lot of the cars on the grid will be looking exactly like the RB20, which is the third evolution of the RB18, the first car in the ground effect era from Red Bull. What Mercedes can prey on is the fact that Newey was not sure how this third evolution will be just as good as its predecessors were, saying that the 2023 domination caught them by surprise, and they don't expect anything similar to happen entering the 2024 season. Adding to this matter even more, Newey said, "RB18, the first car under the new regulations. I think we managed to get fundamentals right in terms of how we approach the design, the research process, the architecture of the car in terms of its layout and so forth. Last year took all of us, me most of all, by complete surprise. I really didn't expect the domination that we had. This year, from what I understand, a lot of our rivals have taken a good look this time, and I suspect there'll be quite a few cars that look very similar to our car. Our car will be very much a third evolution of the 22 car. Now, what we don't know, of course, is the third evolution too conservative, while others have done something different? You just don't know." But Newey has also pointed out one of the biggest risks when it comes to inventing a new design of the car, and while his team has no need to do so, there is one huge obstacle that would prevent them in order to be original again and set new precedents when it comes to racing. According to the masterminds of aerodynamics, there is a dilemma of whether the team should look for new routes or keep developing the one that they've taken a couple of years back. But due to the fact that the sport is source limited and the inventions are very hard to be implemented with all the technical and financial restrictions, this mission is very difficult to achieve. Apart from Newey, Alonso also stressed that in order to beat Red Bull and dethrone them before 2026, you would have to look very closely at what they did and implemented on your own car. His team is a pure example as to how the mechanical obstructions can lead to worsened performance, as the gearbox they had in 2023 was not as compatible to the bodywork. One they borrowed motivation from in Red Bull, and therefore the AMR23 couldn't have extracted the maximum performance out of the car. Adding to this matter even more, Alonso said, "I think eventually all the cars will look similar, because with the restrictions in terms of creativity and the regulations as we have them now, they will eventually converge into a similar car with different colours." Russell has also commented on this matter earlier in 2023, saying that even if Mercedes were to mount Red Bull's side pods on their car and the RB19 would race without side pods, the Silver Arrows would still lose because of the lack of performance is much more than just the side pods of the car. This is why the B-spec of the W14 didn't work as expected, because no matter what the team threw at the car, the structural limitations that the narrow chassis and the bodywork presented to the team were not fixable, only replaceable. With this in mind, Mercedes have seemingly taken a lot of motivation from the RB19, but be that as it may not be the worst idea to do this after all. Wolff has also talked about the ultimate goals of the team, saying that while the results and the design are looking promising so far, the team still has mountains to climb in order to compete up front, adding, "I'm excited that we're about to go racing again, and of course curious and excited to see how the car will perform. I think we will get an early indication of whether we have solved some of the inherent problems that we had on the chassis side last year. We have a mountain to climb to get to the front of the field, but we're focused on doing so." Obviously the real threat is Red Bull, but the Austrian team's choice for the engine cover does give us a bit of hope that maybe Mercedes and McLaren have discovered something that could definitely bring the battle for the championship back alive. Of course, the fact that Hamilton left before even testing out the W15 in the pre-season test in Bahrain indicates otherwise, but Wolff debunked that by saying that Hamilton's contract with Ferrari was signed before he could have any chance of testing the car in the simulator. Now, the ultimate goal for the Austrian is to be a step closer to Red Bull, and one couldn't help but note that Mercedes is approaching the new season with a lot of precaution, not wanting to make huge promises, knowing that this might be something that they could easily fail at. Adding furthermore to this matter, Wolff said, "Formula One is a consistent relative competition against the other teams. You can have a great car, but if you're running around in circles alone, you'll never know if it's the best. We were in a tough fight last season with Ferrari and McLaren, at times Aston Martin, with a big gap between Red Bull and the rest. I would hope we're in the chasing pack at the beginning of the season, and hopefully a step closer to Red Bull." While everybody hopes that Hamilton and Mercedes would have a legitimate shot to fight for the 8th championship of the Brit, it's safe to assume that teams like Ferrari, McLaren and Aston Martin will have something to say and do against this scenario. The future of Mercedes is more or less put in Russell's hands, and even if the W15 is poised to be a very competitive car, it's yet to be seen whether the Silver Arrows would prefer Hamilton as the more experienced driver or Russell as their future superstar in the direct fight with Verstappen and the rest of the grid. With this in mind, what do you think about the W15 copying Red Bull's design? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're interested, click on the video appearing on your screen right now.